Greetings, warlords. Rodge here. Welcome to Saga Thursday, the show all about the skirmish miniatures game from Studio Tomahawk. For this one, we're joined by our old friend Steven.
Hey
How's it going,
guys.
Steven?
Hey, good to be back.
Excellent. So we're gonna talk a little bit about your experience at Adepticon. So you were there for a four full days once again, but we're just gonna dial in on one little snippet, which is your performance at the Age of Hannibal and Alexander
Yeah.
on Friday. So you ended up, spoiler alert, you were the winner of the event. So that is the reason we're having you in particular on for this one. But we'll hear all about your thoughts and your game, see how you did it, and yeah, just kind of check in with you. Yeah, at least once a year we gotta have you on.
Right. Well, as long as I win one at least once a year, then I get to at least earn my Saga Thursday spot on. Unless
That's
unless you
the.
come down here and win another one, and then I can interview you again.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you were on for the Iron Man back last
yeah.
fall, and yeah, we keep running into each other at these events, Steven. But that's all right with me.
A little
I don't.
spoiler there too at the end of this one also. So
Yep. So if people watched the Adepticon recap episode, I went through my first two games in Hannibal and Alexander, and I've saved the third game for this one here with both of us on the line. So
all
it's the
right.
dramatic conclusion
Good,
to the
good.
Rodge's Acon Ancients experience as well. So let's get into it. So what faction did you settle on for this
Well, I
one?
went with successors, and I
Hmm.
think I have a couple comments on that in general. If I had known that there would be so many successors, I don't think I would have taken them. And same to say that we just finished up the Winter League on the Tabletop Simulator Discord there too, and I had taken successors for that as well. Same sort of deal. I didn't expect there to be so many of them, but I think that actually kind of plays into why there are so many successors. So I have a couple theories on that.
Sure.
Right off the bat, people see so many successors show up and they say like, "Oh, that's a clear sign of a way overpowered board." And I think that successors are in the top third of boards in Saga. They are a really good board without a doubt.
Hmm.
They show up there right away. But whether they are higher than that, I think is up for a lot more debate in that case. And I don't think that the fact that they're really, really good is the reason that they show up in such plenty just in this last year of tournaments. Because the first year of tournaments that we had that had Alexander stuff included, we didn't really see that many successors. We had a couple of them show up. And I
Correct.
think
Yeah, I can't even really
yeah, in the
remember
Euro
that
leagues
we
and
had
stuff
any.
too. So I think that, you know, the initial veteran players identify the really, really good boards, and then we either want to take those for a spin right away, right out of the gate, and I did that online with the Indians there, uh, or they want to find something that's the hidden mystery, the surprise one in the bottom of the pack. Either way, the second year rolls around, and you kind of want both of those things. You pick a second army, and I think successors are a really good second army for tons of people for antiquity because you can also make three really unique variants in there. And as I ran into in this tournament, three kind of completely different play style options inside of there too. Probably a lot more than three, but of the other successors that I spectated, those guys were playing a completely different version than I was playing, and their focus and all of those sort of options and equipment, everything was very different than mine. And so I think that there's not just one obvious way to play. And I think if people were just picking boards based on them being the best, you see more like it looks like at the World Cup there, right? You see half the field is Persians because right off the
Sure.
bat, when we are digging through for the best board, we grab the Persian board and a couple others real quick. Successors is the second or third option you think of. And so again, in this next year of tournaments, I think that's why so many successors have showed up, both online, Euro leagues, and home field today too. Because I think there was 6 or 7 successors. Is that right?
Yeah, at least I think there is. Well, let me bring it up.
I don't know if it was as
I've
big
got the
as the
data. Yeah.
Crusaders were in the Crusades day, but
Two, three, five, six, seven. So 7 of the 17.
Yeah.
And
So
but they're all
big chunk.
they're piled in at the top to make it look like there's a little, a few
Right.
more than there are, because 4th through 7th were all successors in the final results there. So yeah, I think those are some good ideas. And I'll say too, when the rubber hits the road with models, with all the different options and choices and stuff, with my Carthaginians, I'm halfway to a successor's.
Exactly.
For if you have Greeks, you could be halfway to a successor. Numidians, halfway to it's depending what.
So
got an elephant. Yeah.
I because of some time constraints that I had in my personal life and some other stuff, I ended up borrowing models for this event, and I'll get into that here in a sec because it did impact the way I played the tournament. But initially, I had picked successors out because I love the Thracians, and I love Thracian models, and I think that the Thracian board is interesting. But if you want to play really hard-nosed, the successor Greek version is an interesting way to play Thracians because you can fill it full of Sarissa or Thracian peltasts and Rompaya guys and light cavalry.
Yeah.
And from a historical perspective, like Third Macedonian War or so, you have the Macedonians starting their campaign with borrowed armies from the Thracians. So like 90% of their troops are Thracian until they can get stuff rolling again. And that is the Greek successors in this case. So I had kind of looked at that board as a more competitive way for me to use a bunch of the cool Aventine Thracian models I got, more so than it just being a rock and roll board. So that segues to the fact that I did take Greek successors, and I had practiced them a lot online, and I really was interested in the heavy weapon warrior unit. I didn't end up using that really at all because javelin guys are often better in every scenario, but not every scenario. But they have Shatter the Ranks on the board there that gives you a +1 to your attack dice. And I am a real sucker for every time I see a +1 and you have a +1 on your board. I get tunnel vision on that, and I think, wow, how can I do that more?
I think that's what
pulls me back.
Auto hit levies.
Right, exactly. That pulls me back to Ordenstadt, once a year, right? You got a +1 and you got heavy weapons, and so you think, is there something? Yeah. And then you move on. But anyway, I thought there was kind of some wild cards in there too. You don't encounter big heavy weapon squads in Age of Antiquity stuff really at all. So
I can't think of.
I think that's basically it. So they have some utility, and they do pretty well against mopping up close rank guys. And on the online league, I only took them a couple of times, and that was mostly against other infantry armies. So, but going into it, I did Greeks, and I did for my my motivation, I forget what it's called, is legatum. I don't know that that's the best one. I really think that the Divite really lends itself to tournaments really well, just because of how constantly flexible it is for each situation. Legatum, is really focused on a really powerful attack, and it's an attack ability. It's I
don't know, after playing two Divite and then doing Legatum with you, I think it's a little scarier, and
right.
Just with the attack power, the Divite a little more predictable on what they're going to be doing, and then I would say Legatum, for a tournament, if you're getting rewarded with warlord kills,
right? Oh, absolutely.
Is might put you over the top there. So I'm expecting a few tales about that as we go through the day here. But the Legatum, I think it brings some hitting power, and just canceling a casualty with the heavies or whatever upper right is nice, and that bottom left rare one changing 3 Conquerors, fails to
Conquerors is basically you're gonna get yourself like a minimum of 6 hits a lot of times on most targets out there with a roll, a re-roll, and then turning 3 of your dice basically into 6s, which I think is interesting language there, instead of like it being just 3 auto hits or something like that. If you were using the Cappadocian mercenaries, you get that 1 extra side of there too. So that's I think Asians with Cappadocians is a common combo because of that a little bit with Legatum. But Hubris also is interesting too, and that'll lead us kind of into the first match a little bit. I'll talk about it more there, but Hubris does something that the successor board struggles at. There's 2 things the successor board has a hard time fighting out of, and that's gaining more attack dice. And sometimes that's important. and being able to come back from having several Saga dice taken away from you. Those are two really hard things for successors because it's hard for them to get more Saga dice. You can kind of bank one each turn, but it's kind of tedious, and you probably want your dice in something that affects the game in a stronger way rather than pitching away dice to get, maybe 2 or 3 more dice in the late game or something like that. But getting extra attack dice is really hard for successors. They're a quality of attacks board over a quantity of attacks.
Sure.
And where it really shines is when you're attacking levy squads and 12-man units. Because you're going to hurt whatever you touch. The dream is that you get to go fight 8 Hearthguard or something like that and just wallop them. But 12 bow levy or something, that you're not going to kill all of them, even if you hit and kill every single one, unless you're rolling a really big squad at 12, or you have some other secondary attack layered in there too. And that can be kind of hard for them as well outside of hegemony. They're kind of premium multi-activate, but so hubris has a big appeal because you can get a lot more attack dice a little bit easier on there. You can get like 7 more attack dice, I think, if you did all their abilities, whereas otherwise you're scratching around for, I think, 3 attack dice. So and that takes a rare and an uncommon. So
another one that gets you a little hittier. And so you went with the middle one there, Legata. So what was your composition here?
So like I said, I had a list that I really loved and I was really practiced at online, but since I was borrowing models, I had to kind of make changes in the last minute to fit what models were available to me. So classically, I had taken 6 points of warriors, and which was basically split between 3 points of Sarissa troops and 3 points of javelin troops, a mix of them being mounted and dismounted. But this, though, I had to take Hearthguard. And I didn't realize that we couldn't make the half-point swap at the table, so I kind of pre-programmed in a half-point swap in the list that I sent in. So I was stuck with a 6-man Hearthguard unit, which, it isn't bad. There's a lot of synergy for it, but I had not practiced it once until my first game. So I was a little nervous about fielding them. We also had the ruses in this. So my standard list, though, was 3 points of Sarissa troops, usually split into 2 units of 10, and then a little 4-pack in the back. That little 4-pack is usually important for late game and realizing, I still need 1 phalanx if I want to get my fatigue-free move out of hegemony. So I'm giving up 2 attacks on both of my Sarissa squads to make sure that I have a later game phalanx, pretty much. And that became important in the long run. So, then I had 6 foot javelin guys, 6 mounted javelin guys, and then 6 Hearthguard, mounted Hearthguard. I had the options for the foot phalanx Hearthguard if I wanted as well, and I had the options for them, but I stuck with the mounted. And then we had our ruses. And I'll kind of struggle for a second to remember the names of all the ruses.
You can just say what they do.
Yeah, I had 2 of the veteran ones, which I did not know until later on, as you know pretty well, that I forgot that the veteran ruses give you extra points if you kill the guys that
they count as a merc.
Veterans, right? They get the merc point there. So that was kind of a slip there. But I took Stoic, which makes it so that units around you, if they're destroyed, don't give you a fatigue. And I put that on the warlord because he's pretty close to the line, and it's a pretty common tactic to blow up a squad to put a fatigue on there. And then I took Paragon, which was one that if the unit killed another unit, they pulled the fatigue from all the friendly units within M of the fight, or from an M of them, maybe. Put that on the big Hearthguard squad because that was my kind of highest chance of killing a whole unit most of the time. And I figured that they would also be able to strategically move to a location to kill a unit when they need to pull fatigue off other spots easier. So then I took Forced March, which I think is probably one of the best ruses. That's the one where you get to add an additional either short or M to your move, but you have to stay outside of M of enemy units at all times throughout that move. And that's not such a big deal if you're using it on cavalry, because you just want to get within M plus 0.1 to get your charge in pretty much. So that was a pretty big one. Then I took Deluge, which was that you have to, or it allows you to activate a unit that has not fought or charged in that turn for a fatigue-free move, and at the end of it, they can't be activated the rest of the round. I thought that would be an important one for some of the objective scenarios, so that was in there. Then I had one that at the start of the game gives you 2 free movement activations on 1 of your or 2 of your units, and then the last one was just kind of a freebie in there, which was raise your armor by 1 on an exhausted unit. My strategy with picking all of these mostly was that I wanted the most bang for my buck. You got six ruse points, so I bought 6 single point ones, thinking that the situations would arise where I got to use those. And they did come in. They were a factor, I think, in each of my games. I had at least one play that was important that was built around one of those ruses. So I liked them for sure. Whether they should be in all games, I haven't thought about that much yet, but I definitely benefited from them. So
sure. That reminds me, I asked Scott to keep a tally of all the ruses that everybody submitted, and I just remember now that I told him or asked him to do that. So I'm gonna for our chat here, I'm gonna ping him and see if we can get that info and see what the breakdown was. And I think, I don't know, from your games, he said it seemed like there was a pretty big spread. Actually, it wasn't necessarily everybody choosing the same 3 or 4. There was a pretty good mix from what he told me, but
and this was the generic ruses for listeners in this case, none of the faction ruses. So these are the ones that you can download on the Studio Tomahawk website. So,
so
I maybe would have considered taking the one that doesn't allow folks to close ranks.
Yeah, that was
maybe
on my list. A few folks had their eye on that one, I'm sure. Yeah,
probably would have tossed Paragon and tossed the exhausted one and maybe taken that. I don't know for sure though. New practice.
Yeah, there's a few good ones, and yeah, fun to break out the ruses every once in a while. Definitely, probably not my preferred default way to play.
No, I don't know if it needed. Yeah, Saga's good enough and complex enough on its own without another layer of gotchas sometimes. But when everyone knows they're happening and it's a unique event, I think it's maybe a little different. But
yeah, all right. Well, that is the setup
so
here.
That's the setup. Yeah.
Yeah, game 1. Who you step up there?
Game 1, it was like a desecration equivalent. I forget exactly some of the differences in there, but it was basically desecration with putting your 3 objectives. It was Jim Randall.
Okay, cool.
I like a lot. You know, I've played Jim before, and I love his personality. I love his skill level.
Yeah, he's a skilled opponent. So.
And so he also brought successors. And it was interesting to see that he basically brought, in my mind, a successor list that was really good at killing other successor lists.
Sure.
He was Asian, I believe. Yeah, he was Asian, and then he had hubris inside of there also.
Oh, cool.
Or he might have been Greek like me.
Looking at the thing here, I think, we recorded Greek for him.
Okay, he might have been Greek. So. But he was a hubris version of it. And again, I was kind of worried about that because the big deal then in that case is getting those extra attacks. And when you're having Sarissa fight on Sarissa fights of just warrior squads and you both have the same abilities, one guy having extra attacks really, really starts to add up. And so I knew kind of right off the bat that in the main combat line, wherever our Sarissas were all going to end up squaring off, that he was probably going to get the better of me in the boxing match. And so I needed to think of ways that I was going to try to bottle up that part of the fight to just one part of the board, and then to try to get my objectives spread out enough so that my hope was that we would both go after the same objectives, basically placed right next to each other that the opponent had placed, because one has to be placed outside of your deployment zone. We both kind of put this in an alley to my right flank, and he had squared up most of his infantry there. And I also lined up right across him, but also had spread my objectives way to my left flank pretty much as far out as I could. My hope being in my strategy would be that I grab those objectives on his side as fast as I could with my cavalry, because I felt like that the rest of the game I was going to be spending all my dice to try to break even in the melee fight. most of the time. And I would hope that if I got more of the objectives and we break even in the melee fight, that because of the cap for the kill points, that I'd come out the winner on that. And so that was my strategy going into it. And honestly, that's about exactly how the game squared up. I was very nervous that Jim was going to catch any of the slips that I was going to have. And so my very first turn using forced march, I threw one of my light cavalry squads out to hit his backfield desecration token and nab that on the first turn. And then I was able to nab another one on the turn that same turn. So I started the game with 2 grabs on the desecration tokens. And I was pretty happy with that because I figured from that point on, if all my light troops went down, I just need to get kind of an even trade here in the combat fight. So, and his way of playing it was a lot different than mine too. He was really built around Shatter the Ranks there, which is the one that gives you +1 on your attack dice rolls. And in this case for Hubris, he was getting +5 attack dice on that too.
Yeah.
And so that was a nervous square up for me. I was able to, well, both sides were resilient. I stacked up with the heavies and was able to endure 1 or so of those Shatter the Ranks charges. And then I was able to snake through and get his warlord with a couple small units in Legatum. You know the drill on that one is my main reason for taking Legatum pretty much. So I think that Legatum won me the game on the melee side as well, just because I could guarantee that my attacks were going to end up a little bit better each time. And that closing ranks, defense dice from heavy armor, the heavies all stacked up is still usually enough to have a surviving unit at the end of a big Shatter the Ranks charge afterwards. So, but yeah, he was playing a lot of that side of the board. It took me by surprise a little bit because, like I said, it was just the complete opposite of how I play the board. And his was a very, very full-fronted. It was a boxing match, like I said, and it was fun. It was a great way to start. And there was not a turn where I was like ever dramatically up in points or anything like that. There was usually just an exchange back and forth on both sides. And I feel like I was eking out just 1 or 2 points here and there more on each one of those exchanges. And that ultimately, I think, worked it out for me too. There was around turn 4 or so, I think he was satisfied with his performance or his chances on the melee side of the board there. And I was glad to see that because I felt like he was going to still be focusing on that side when I realized that there was not enough moves really for him left to get over and pop one of my desecration tokens unless he abandoned the fight. And I was still going to probably have 1 more turn of reprisals to slow him down just somewhere in the process. So came out then for the win, and it was pretty dang close. I think as we totaled it up in massacre points, I think I got like a min point win if it was going to be clash or something like that. But because of the caps, he was capped out, I think, at 16, and I got in the like mid 20s or something like that.
Sure, cool.
But yeah, but it was a heavy fight from the first round. And that's something I have to say about my performance through all of these is all 3 of the players and armies that I went up against were all top notch in this case too. So there's going to be no surprise match where I got to show somebody what Legatum does for the very first time or something like that.
Yeah. It's always the Adepticon, there's a good portion of the crowd just sign up for fun, first Saga event, or they play every year, but they don't play in between every year.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, you'll invariably run into those at some point. It
sounds like Jim has had a good year in his clubs since I had seen him last. So he said I think he was playing at least a game a week, maybe 2 games a week. So he's actually lapping me on that one. I think my prep coming into this tournament was pretty small, with the exception of successors, just because I had run them in a tournament, recently. So
interesting. All right.
So yeah, that was that one. That was Desecration. And I skated out of there pretty pleased. I enjoyed, successors on successors is a fun fight. It really made me at the end of this want to consider getting people together for that Daidachi campaign.
Oh yeah, Daidachi, yeah.
There. Sounds fun. So I need to look at it a little closer.
Pretty
but
cool.
Successors on Successors has proven to be an interesting and varied fight. So
Yeah, it might not be as stale
right.
as you might suspect. Just everything you mentioned before, just about the variety
Yeah,
and options and ways of playing. So round two here, it looks like the score sheet is correct. Your matchup against Britt.
that's
Is it?
right. And
Okay.
so Britt brought a hell of a list in, and I know that because it was my own tournament winning list with the Indians last year in the online league. And this event was really catered against shooting in the fact that uh, one a normal kill counts as levy kills or whatever for shooting. And
Sure,
so
yeah, for
the
most
Indians,
models.
we were going to guess, were going to be severely pushed back because they are arguably the biggest leaf blower out there when it comes to light
Hmm.
chariot shooting and everything else. And so, Britt's idea kind of was, well, let's just double down 100% then and see if I can make up for it by just blowing everyone off the table and getting still enough points inside of
Sure.
there
Yep.
to get the win. So sitting down across from it, I was pretty nervous. I was very nervous because when I've played that list against successors never made it halfway across the board. Um,
Sure.
they there's
But
different phases of playing with the Indians, and I kind of jokingly over the weekend had talked about it being kind of like Pokemon in this case, that you send the chariots and then the chariots do their entire phase and the chariots come back. All right, now it's elephant
all
phase.
right, all
Elephant
right.
phase goes. Elephant phase is done. Come on back. It's infantry time. And it just cycles like that. And so even when you knock down and you defeat the first part of the Indian game, a whole new game kicks in right afterwards. And that's elephant phase. And that's sometimes a way worse phase than you were thinking.
Sure. Yeah, and they're sort of
So,
like Carolingians where they got the dice
oh,
queued up, so taking
it's,
out a unit or two doesn't impact, the attacks necessarily coming at you.
yeah.
Um,
And so
but
I coming into this, then I already knew obviously a lot of anti-Indian thoughts and tactics because it was the list I was familiar with and it's
Mhm.
scenarios we had practiced and all this type of stuff. So I knew a couple of tricks right off the bat to try to make it more difficult for Brit and to hope. My hope going into this is that somewhere along the line I could survive the light chariot game and win it, and then that he would trip up somewhere in the elephant phase and that I could win on objectives or take out the Raja or
sure. So
survive the backfield bow shooting a little bit.
so that's important for this scenario is one of the Polish one with five
Ryan, we should maybe talk about that
objectives
for a sec.
in the
Yeah,
cross formation. So I would assume,
what do we call this
that would be
scenario again?
um I don't
I
know
can't
the
remember, but it
names
is
of any of them.
one of the other most significant parts of it that was going to be, I felt to my advantage, is that there's a limited deployment zone. You have to deploy in the
And
table quarters.
you can really gum those up if you're putting larges on the other guy's side,
And that was my
especially with
first
Brett's
goal.
chariot. Yeah, that
And
could
so
become
chariots can't enter
sad.
terrain at all. And so I wanted to get just enough terrain down so that I knew exactly where his chariots had to deploy because there was no other option. And that way I could hopefully try to prepare some type of defense or at least count out his activations enough to minimize how many times he was going to be able to shoot me up before I could even get into the field. He also, because we had practiced this, he also knew that going into this, I wanted to go first. In all of the other scenarios throughout Adepticon, I wanted to go second because you got to roll some extra dice
Hmm.
and you got to see your opponent's full deployment and you got to see there's a lot of advantages to going second then. And you got to place the first piece of terrain. So going second normally is really huge, but I wanted to get those light chariots ASAP. And if I could get them on the first turn, I was going to get them on the first turn. I
Hmm.
really had figured out with successors, I feel like, that I like to play a very, very hot turns 1, 2, and 3 with successors because they have a hard time coming back later on. They have a hard time getting more dice later on when their units are diminished because they don't get more attack dice. They don't hit as hard. And
Hmm.
so I feel like successors with Legadum need to go super hot on the first couple turns to try to get everything they can out of it, or at least pick the fights that they want before everything falls out. And I, especially too, I talked about all this stuff for an 8-hour drive up there with Britt too.
Yeah.
We practiced on this, so like he's privy to all the things I wanted to do. So he took first player in this case because he knew that I also
Okay.
didn't want him to just fly across the field and blow me up. He did, he got it, but I had that terrain advantage, and I also was able to square it so that I knew his Raja was going to have to deploy in terrain also, which isn't that big a deal. But when you're cutting even very short off of the sum total of the Raja's movement in a game, that's good. You want to cut
Yeah.
it down whenever you can and keep him slow, or at least that he'd be slow to develop into the center of the field. Because he was kind of on we obey duty for a chariot group and a levy unit in the back. So I was able to get the levy unit split, get the chariot split, and game starts just as I thought. He comes hauling across the table with one of the light chariot units.
Coming
I
in
should
hot.
also comment, though, that Britt came in with a small disadvantage, which was that he mispicked one of his ruses. He accidentally picked a ruse that had, it was a 3-point ruse that gave something to Hearthguard, and his unit didn't have any Hearthguard in that list. So he was missing out on one of the key pieces, and that was going to be a big one because it was the one to give a unit who starts within very short of your warlord determination.
Yeah.
And so giving that to the chariots is that one extra inch out there a little bit. That's pretty big. So he had a hole in his bicycle tire to start, and so I was able to survive that first round of shooting. I'd also talk to him sometimes about, with those light chariots, that you either get them back to safety or you double down and you stay where you're at and you shoot like crazy and you just make them have to spend a turn to kill that chariot squad and then bring your next chariot squad in next turn.
Yeah.
That's about how it went. I positioned stuff out and we were so spread apart that he got kind of minimal shooting kills at the beginning. He was able to pick off some of the units. And I had kind of tucked away a little bit. He really wanted to go get my cavalry because he was worried about the reach, my turn of going to go get his squad, I think. And so he focused in on that. Didn't get as many kills, I think, as he surely wanted down there. And I was able to eat that chariot squad. On my turn, exactly what he predicted. I threw myself way up there to go get his other chariot squad. In this case, though, I threw my Hearthguard up there. I had moved somewhat to consolidate in the center of the board around the same time too, hoping that I could have one of my favorite abilities on the successor board is Pride of the Diadachi, I think it's called, in the bottom right, and that's what gives you a long charge. So you can charge either 8 inches or 10 inches with your Sarissa units. So I wanted to get them midfield so I could reach out and touch an elephant that he had started to develop towards the center too. Threw the Hearthguard over there. They were successful at crippling the chariots. I actually think maybe I didn't kill them all. I'm trying to remember. Maybe I did kill them. Either way, I really threw the Hearthguard kind of in the trash out there, knowing that I might not get those guys back, but I was willing to trade Hearthguard for the levy pretty much. I was within 12 or so inches. The math is slightly off there from one of his elephants, though. And so on his turn, now that the chariot phase of the game was done, he was split on what he wanted to do, but ultimately he wanted to develop that elephant over into an attack on my Hearthguard. And so he's stacking his dice there. Is finally decided on what we want. We get into the phase a little bit. And this has happened to me before with the big long elephant charge, is that it requires 3 different activations and they kind of have to go in the right order pretty much. And so he had messed up the dice placement on that and ended up having his elephant strand out away from the Hearthguard. And that was the watershed moment at that point. I knew that because the chariots were gone, the Raja was far away from a meaningful part of the fight, and I knew for a fact I was going to get that elephant on the next turn. And he knew it too. As soon as he looked down and went to kind of pull dice off his board in a certain area and kind of froze. And every Saga player knows exactly what I'm talking about. That horrendous feeling as you look down and think like, oh boy, I I forgot to put this activation on or this important ability or something.
Yeah, you put the die down at some point, and then later on you move that die. But mentally,
that's exactly what it was. I think
that die is still there when you start going, and you're
And so I was able to run up and grab that elephant, and then it cascaded down from there. More being a good sport, I feel like, than anything else, he ended up pulling the Raja out to try to I was trying to get all 5 objectives because you got extra tournament points for that.
Yeah.
And one of the only real successful there's always a fight like this in all Saga games. There's a fight with his levy squad and a small squad of mine in the backfield that went like back and forth. There's always like the epic fight that means nothing that's going on in the side or whatever. And the Raja guys came out, crushed that unit, I think, and I was able to come up and layer some attacks and eat the Raja finally in combat at the end there. And that was happy for me because the Raja doesn't really ever go down. I think successors have all the tools to do it pretty easily, though. You just need a couple shots and then a charge. And they have lots of shots because all their infantry has sarissas. You're going to be able to sometimes get a couple pokes before you charge. I think they do pretty well against trying to get rid of him. So. But yeah, so I was sweating bullets going into that, thinking like, oh man, we'll see how I feel about this at the end of turn 2. And I was feeling good at turn 2. Then the elephant mistake happened, and I was home free on that point to kind of engage. So, so yeah, it was
wow, yeah,
it was like
good
swimming
game.
with a shark for sure.
Sweating some bullets there,
yeah,
for sure. Awesome. Well, yeah, sounds like a good game.
Yeah, it was.
What do you think if you had met him in round 3? What do you?
Round 3.
How are you feeling about your chances
fight, right?
in that one? Yeah, it's just a straight fight mostly. Yeah.
I think I was prepared for it. I think I think that one of the reasons I had forced march and stuff like that in there was in the mindset of taking out light chariots.
Sure.
And being able to shoot squads out there. I think that it would have been a closer game for sure. But I think that my experience with and against that board would have paid off for me in a straight up brawl, which is the next round, the diagonal fight, right?
Yeah, so let's get into round 3 there. It was you and I matched up. And
there he is on the final tables again we meet.
In. So you can't see it, but I've got a pick of the after we've deployed, so before the first turn, so people have a good idea of the terrain setup. Kind of a field in the middle as a pivot point, and then you really cut down on my deployment zone with the steep hill on my right. And
I was hoping to really make you had those beautiful big heavy chariots, with giant bases on them, and I was really hoping to try to create some pinch points to make it hard to maneuver and get stuff clogged up. Because you also have the 2 big cavalry units, which also sometimes can get clogged up in gaps. And I was hoping, well, we'll get into the whole game there too. I was hoping to get the heat on you there and get a motion going to get some stuff clogged up. But I think the audience then maybe knows your list going into this.
Yeah, so I'll just recap. I was running Carthaginians, point of heavy chariots, point of Hearthguard, just hanging back with the warlord. I had 10 contingent warriors on foot, no special equipment, and then 2 units of 11, Numidian cavalry with javelins there. And so I think we both bid 1, but we roll off. I got to go second. I chose to go second, so I knew you're gonna bring some heat regardless. But my first, if I had gone first, it would have been kind of a turtle turn, anyways. So,
and I think successors have a big advantage in the go second format just because of how hard it is for them to gain and to stash dice. Just get that extra bit of dice at the beginning goes a long way, because even if you put all 3 of them into Alexander's heirs, you're going to guarantee that you're going to modify up, 3 more rares on the start of your successor turn. So I think successors specifically have a lot to gain by going second. But at the same time, despite that, games with Joe and I usually go down to a couple points or something like that. And this was no exception, and I knew I did not want to give more than a point to Joe's direction because he'd make me pay for it later on, that's for sure. So
it ended up definitely being a factor towards the end of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And you're right. So this one, it was back and forth and so darn close. And every, if it's just a point or 2 off, like every single combat, you're thinking, Well, that one I didn't roll as good as I should have statistically. So if that just would have been average, that would have been it. So you remember all the ones for you, and I remember all the ones on my side. And
those heavy chariot ones, that was some of the, we'll get into that spot. Yeah. But I would say that I started the game with a clear goal in mind, which is that Joe is a very patient and calculated player. And a lot of his moves and things like that are carefully plotted out. And when you play in that fashion, it's easy to set up a mental architecture that helps you process the next couple rounds in kind of an efficient way. And I play that way myself a lot of times too. But then my first and most important goal then was to make sure that my first turn or two was as reckless as possible. To create something that was not advisable, not good, as far as if we were just writing like Saga Theory down or something like that. And so for the audience, then that was me shooting my 6-man mounted Hearthguard unit and my 6 mounted Jav unit all the way basically to the back of the board, his board, to smack into one of the mounted Jav Cav units there.
Correct.
And I did want to just pull teeth to a degree. And I was hoping that I would cycle it in a way that I could use heavies to get another round of a smart fatigue-free charge left on it, because I had styled up hegemony so that I would have one fatigue-free charge after my fight with the heavies to either decide to take advantage of whatever the Hearthguard had just done, or in the case of what actually did happen, get the Hearthguard back home fatigue-free, or at least with one less fatigue into a safe area.
See how the first round goes, and then kind of
because there
play from there. Yeah,
there's a really weird possibility that if you had, if you'd pulled different cavalry models or a little bit more successful or not, that there might have been a weird gateway charge to the warlord, and I don't think I would have got him on there, but there was it would be doubling down on an aspect of chaos that I had helped create, and I could fill that vacuum of the point loss with movement in my next 2 rounds, I had hoped. And it was, like I said, mixed success. I don't even think I accomplished my main goals out there, and ended up feeding and dropping off the light cav unit and then getting the Hearthguard back home, which then we're due on your round to meet the big heavy chariot. I did get to see at the start of Joe's round then that part of what I wanted to have happen was beginning to happen to a degree, which was a shift of a lot of bodies to my left flank around the pinch point that I had put on the terrain in order to try to get either the heavy chariots active, or I was thinking that Joe, and eventually did, was going to shoot the cavalry on his right flank, my left, way down into my backfield to scoop. And I knew the scoop would come at some point, and so I was hoping the clog would slow down the scoop for a turn or so. And I had a larger Sarissa unit in kind of a threatening position in the backfield because of Pride of the Diadachi, that a slip up on the move with a cavalry unit was going to probably be really bad for him. So that was kind of my focus going out of that first part of the game there. And then in come the heavy chariots, huh?
Yeah, and we can even... just the way it kind of worked out is a real tit for tat on the first couple turns. So we can say your Hearthguard pack moved up, double move into the Numidian Cav there, going in fatigue free. I don't know what else I queued up. So in defense, I had coordination and tenacity. So exploding 6s on defense,
really rough, with
4 rerolls, and it's definitely really. Whenever those guys take a beating like that, more dice, more chances for 6s, but you're really at the dice gods when it comes to those 6s and those rerolls. I could block them all, or, I've had games where, out of 10, I blocked 2, even with all that stuff. So it's just like, lots riding on this one. So this one ended up being a middle, kind of down the road, saved about half of them, something like that.
Yeah.
So the Hearthguard bounced off. You ended up pulling them back, and then your Cav came in to kind of finish the job. So there's exactly 6 guys left. You had 6 attacks, and you're going to be auto-hitting me with my fatigue.
Right.
And so I ended up using your fatigue because If I just let you get 6 hits, like I'm gonna fail all 6
I just
for
wanted to
sure.
get that Saga dice. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna fail them all for sure. So, ended up taking your fatigue up. You did roll a 1 for me. I saved 2, so ended up being down to 3 guys, and then that unit basically is out of the game. They're just pulling back for the rest of the game. So on my turn, I send my warlord in to try to finish off that cav unit, but unfortunately didn't. I think you had 4 guys left. Couldn't quite do the job.
Yeah, I
with
got
those
lucky
attacks.
on that one, I think.
And so that ended up being quite huge because the infantry on foot were supposed to screen for him, but instead I had to charge him in to finish off that unit. And so they were partially screening the warlord, not really, but it had to be done. I had to take out that unit, move the heavy chariots over, slam into your Hearthguard, try to finish him off. I'm exhausted at the end. Or I think one was killed, wasn't it, on that first one? Or was that later?
Oh yeah, that's what it was. I got the exact number of hits that I needed to kill the whole squad, and then you had saved out. Correct.
Yeah, I had a reroll from my stuff somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, it was the ruse.
The offerings. Yeah. So you're down to 1 Hearthguard after that, and I lost. I'm like, this isn't good. Then your turn. My turn. You want to describe how that one went?
Yeah, and so at this point I had a confliction because I had 2 juicy targets. I knew I had to kill the chariot. Like it's a must. Yeah. It must happen in the turn. It's sitting like in a kiss away from most of my army. It's exhausted. It's just hanging out there. But at the same time, that warlord is sitting in the backfield, and he's got fatigue on him too.
I knew he was a little exposed, but I didn't realize to the degree, the danger he was really in. So he had 2 fatigues. He wasn't really screened. You could just kind of move around. Yeah.
And so this is actually where my forced march was on that one. And I think that was the thing that got me into the range there to be able to get it, was that forced march helped me on a successive move to get in. Because when you are fighting a mounted warlord and you've got legatum on you, you don't really care if you have a million fatigue coming in or what. You're going to be hitting them almost all those hits every single time.
Came in with the fatigue. It took myself to a 6, but with a +1, you're hitting on 5s with a reroll, and when if there's anything left, they change to 6s. So. I was able to snake the boys out there on their little warlord-seeking missile there. Pushed through, got exactly what I think I needed as far as your saves and stuff. So you did, 5 successful. I didn't save any, or save 1 or something. So my Hearthguard were right there. Yeah. But you did 5 hits, so I'm not gonna kill the Hearthguard and the warlord. So he's pulled fatigue bombs, and nicely played move there.
The justice came back at me as
it took some resources to do that. So that
was worth it. I think
that is definitely
my successor plan for every single one of these matches, no matter what, is at least one of my 5 turns is going to be kill the warlord. And then there's 4 other turns of game, pretty much, because it was too valuable in the tournament points not to be trying to get that warlord all the time, pretty much. And then another reason I was throwing myself out there early at this cavalry is I'll do a shout out to Rowan out there, one of the Australian players that I played with in the online league. He's somebody who eventually knocked me out on our rematch, but was Carthaginian player also, and he also was playing 2, I think 12-man light cavalry units, and then another complement inside of there too. And so I already had a lot of respect for the double large Jav-Cav Carthaginian kind of build and setup, and I didn't want to see it get the type of active play that I was worried about. And so I knew I maybe give myself a points disadvantage, or at least the possibility of one at the beginning, just to not see those going. Just because, again, the Australian players are great, and I really loved watching Rowe play his Carthaginians a little bit. So I had some light cav in my mind from him. So. But yeah, going into my turn then, I pleased as punch about the warlord fight. And so I charge my warlord into the exhausted heavy chariot. and I got one hit in there, if I recall, and you saved the hit, right?
Saved it, yeah.
And so it was bad luck. It wasn't that bad. He was armor 6, I think. I think you had a fatigue
Yeah,
or
I
something.
had the ruse.
Oh,
Maybe I
that's what it
used
was.
it. I might have used a reroll. I can't remember where those
Right. It was
rerolls
the
got
ruse
spent.
combo there on that one. He had this. Joe pretty much had the same ruses as I did.
On some of them, yep.
Or like 4 of them or so, right? So, oh no, 3 because
3 the same. Plus, I took the rerolls offerings.
So
And
yeah,
so
he
they made
kicked in and
a
it saved
difference.
him.
Yeah.
And so that it was a whole other turn of having to leave that Hearthguard or that chariot unit, and the Saga dice it generates, and the threat of even just one heavy chariot can do a lot
Yeah.
sometimes. And so
So
that was
that was a bad bounce. Yeah. Is
and
that on
I
my
don't think I
turn?
got him that turn. I had to let him go. So
My turn, that was the Saga die. So he was exhausted or whatever. Had to kind of overload Hearthguards just to make sure. But he charged in, finished off that one Hearthguard that he couldn't get on the
yeah,
first try.
that's what it was.
And then my Hearthguard take out your little Jav unit. So at this point, it's just your warlord and a whole bunch of guys with pointy sticks.
Yep.
And then it kind of, the action slowed down a little bit
Says
after
you.
that.
I mean, I got on the ice. I pulled the parachute at this point, or I jumped out without a parachute, I should say, because it's at this point that I have the triple activate warlord charge across the board.
Yeah, so I try to. For me, I'm kind of withdrawing behind that light cover. I think I'm a point or two up. I'm just kind of waiting. I'm second player, so if I can have like a really good turn 4, we didn't even talk about the scenario, but it's you score massacre at the end of turn 4, and then you score it again at the end of turn 6. So I'm just kind of waiting and seeing if there's some way I could sneak up a couple extra points on turn 4, and then kind of just get the hell out of there, before before the hammer falls. But you're still bringing it, so yeah.
And with that same note, then too, I'm thinking I have to, the things I get done on turn 4 and below are gonna double up at the end of the game, and I have to get a better exchange if my guys die. I thought maybe I could throw the warlord in there, grab up the Hearthguard, which I think is who I threw into, and then use the same ruse that Joe had used on me to raise my exhaustion level, and maybe, just maybe, let the warlord live for a single round in there. I knew I was probably giving him up, but I was gambling at that point and hoping on an inaccurate dice roll or something like that to go through in my favor. So that was my last gamble to try to get over, like Joe said, the very small point spread leading to Joe on 1 point, I think, right at the end of 4.
1 point, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was going to double later on in the game to basically be a 2-point spread, and so that mattered a lot at that point. So
yeah, you went in, took out the Hearthguard, got them all in one swipe, and so it was down to those contingent warriors on foot. Just kind of had raw dog it on those dice. Can't soup it up or anything. So there's 6, 7, or 8 of them, 9 of them left. I don't remember exactly. And I think I got 1 or 2 6s, maybe just 1 6. And you had the chance there, but popped them.
Got the right amount.
Yeah. So if you killed 4 in return. So if I had made that would have been, I didn't have another chance to really ever get them. So, just those little single die rolls, for these close games, what
Well, and is this also the same turn, or is it the turn following then, where you do the maneuver into my backfield? I think it's the same turn that you do the.
Yes.
Well, because at a certain point, it was really important for the turn 4 factor, because also for this scenario, at the end of turn 4, all units that were inside of your deployment zone count as being destroyed.
Correct. So yeah, either concurrent or at some point. So I moved the horsemen, the surviving unit, basically all the way to your back line, kind of daring you to try. You'd have to double back 1 or 2 activations, fight me, poke me, and then either just stay there and take the loss, or 1 or 2 back out of your deployment zone. So I think depending on your dice rolls, definitely could have been done, but
Well,
it
and
took
I
a lot
was
of
trying to,
resources, wasn't guaranteed. Is it going to be a mistake or not?
as you counted out there, I think it would have taken me about 4 or 5 Saga dice, and at this point, we've already counted off some units I've lost. That's the whole successor turn.
Hmm.
Um, and I had to try to decide because the units that were killed in your backfield because of the scenario count as levy kills, and it was a big warrior squad down there, but my warrior squad hadn't been touched yet of 10 men, or maybe had been touched once. Uh, I just try to do the math in my head. If I went over there and wallop that unit, is it an equal exchange at the end, or do I get the point or not? And I think
Yeah,
the math was really against me by a couple points on that one too.
it's
And I
hard to
just
do,
thought,
yeah, on the fly.
if the
'Cause
successors could get more attacks, if I was playing Jim Randall style over there, I would have really considered it, because I would have come in, I would have done a Shatter the Ranks style attack, and I would have
mhm.
had 5 more attacks, and I'd be auto hitting because of the +1 and the Sarissas on top of it. Uh, and so, that's where hubris would have shined, is in those type of scenarios where I look over and I say, if I kill this squad, it's going to work in my favor, but it's impossible for me to get that number of dice. I think hubris shines a little bit in that moment. So, but I'll trade all those attack dice for that one legatum warlord killing maneuver every game.
Yeah,
So,
so that worked out well. So yeah, that was kind of turn 4. We added it up. I
yep,
was up by 1
yep.
because of the two ruses and the them
Ah!
counting as extra. So you were actually one ahead on pure numbers or whatever. But when you add those in, then I was up by 1.
Yep.
Turn 5, I believe, was just kind of a null.
Throwing rocks at each other just to
Turn.
see if one of us could scratch another point or two off the other is pretty much the remainder of the game. The backfield action and me losing the warlord was really the last significant parts of the game, if I recall.
So we go in. Well, actually, yeah. So turn 5.
Oh,
this is one of those where it's 50-50. So I'm up. We're going to add massacre points again. So I'm going to be up by 1 again. So it's going to be a net 2. So on this one, if I can scoop 1 more and then the game ends, then I would be up by 3. So that's the deal there. So I do move up the javelins, and then I do scoop. With all you had, your big pile of defense dice and everything, and I hit once or twice, and sure enough, I think you've out of the 5 or 6, you fail all but 1 or something. So 1 guy goes down, so it's exactly up by 3. But thinking about it later, we did not, in our calculations, we didn't add the bid point for you into like our tallies there. So even if that game would have ended, I would have only been up by 2 because we hadn't added it in when we were doing that calculation. So at this point, so I moved up kind of for nothing, once we realized that. But I did scoop that 1 point. We went for another turn, and now I knew I was going to be taking some hits, but I had a threshold of +3, and so hopefully I can take some of your guys down with me. So at least you can't get all the way, a net gain of 6 to go all the way to the other way. But
and I do put the Sarissas into that Javcav squad and do not cover that spread at the very end.
Yeah, so there ends up being 1 guy left.
Yep.
You're doing wicked damage. I was rolling.
I can't say I didn't try. I got as good as I could at that point, but
I was a little junky there. So you moved it 5 all the way back 5. So you ended up being 2 up in the end from my 2 or 3 up, including the bid point. So
it's a heck of a game, though.
Yeah, so ended up being a really, really tight, close game. And any one of these, the chariot, if you had popped it the first time, if I had saved
a little more action going,
1 more warrior here or a Hearthguard here, or for either one of us, would have been enough to
And like I said, in a way that it kind of factored into my play that our games go that way. And I know you're going to count it down to the very point at the time that you need to count the vote. And so I know I have to have there has to be a wild card variable in there because you beat me on the point count. You'll always find the one scratch to get the point you need. And so I have to say, God, let's throw it to the wind a little bit on some of these and keep it as irregular for most of these as we can be. But
sure.
And again, I think, like I said, I think successors for the first half of their game play well into that type of stuff. They can really charge and then charge again, even though it didn't roll on this one. But one of the most common combos for me with successors ends up being one of those long Pride of the Diadachi charges, hit the heavy so you take no fatigue, and then you hit hegemony fatigue free to have that same unit charge a second time into a fight. And usually you can clear off anybody's tough defensive ability. And that's kind of where I was thinking to end up going initially for clearing some of these Carthaginian stuff is you have to hit, cycle, and then come back in. But my Sarissas were pretty much last to the fight for most of the engagements, so it wasn't as big of a factor. I tried to see maybe if I was going to set it up with that Hearthguard unit, but that's not how the cards landed. So,
sure. Well, as it ended out, you were actually ahead a few points going into this last one. So a draw is actually going to be a victory for you, and it turned out that way. So perhaps my conservative play towards the end, I really needed a victory in order to take it in the end. And it's interesting. So there was a third player who had 2 wins going into the last round, but that was Charlie Clay.
Yeah.
But he dropped out. He left. He left.
And he was hungry.
Yeah, he was hungry. So there could have been a scenario, if he had won the third game, he pops over both of us. But
I wonder who he was going to be squared up against.
Yeah, I'm not.
He had Median Persians, is what he was playing.
Yeah,
so
he was rocking some Persies. It's a good question. So in the end, that ended up not being a factor, and so it was just down to both of us, and you were able to secure those 2 warlord kills, or 2 points each. So you were 4 up ahead of me. I had 0 warlord kills. So that's what put you over the top in the end. An extra 4 points over me in the battle, and well done, my man. Well earned.
It was a lot of fun, and like I said, it was really cool to see all the other successors throughout the events. Like I said, playing so different. On the doubles day, we played against father-son combo, and Dad was using Egyptian successors, and he was using Divite, and it was like 2 blobs of levy and 2 blobs of warriors on the front line. Mm-hmm. And it was just very intimidating play to watch the bodies quickly move up with the Divite there a little bit, that I definitely saw like, wow, I think you could really get something done. But one of the other surprising builds to me, and it showed up in at least 2 players, but I think maybe folks were running it a little different, was the double elephant lists.
Yeah, that one.
There's I think 3 different successors who had a 2 elephant unit, 1 Egyptian one, and I think 2 Asian ones, because one came from our club in that case. But I didn't really see the combo with Divite there until I was watching Adam playing his, and they have the combo so that at the end of your phase, as in orders, a unit within very short gets to pull off 2 fatigue.
Wipe 2,
yeah.
Right off.
So if you're double and trucking your 2 elephant unit all around, you're pulling fatigue off left and right. You got a lot of flexibility with it, and you've got heavy armor coming real easy for you, and you've got easy activations. And so I said, just from that synergy, wow, there's a whole combo on that board by itself that isn't anything to do with the way that I play successors and stuff. And so whether it's the levy push or the hubris boxing match style or the double elephant or the kind of more even approach I think that I took, there's a lot of varied lists. And that was my experience with the Crusades day too. And we're not going to talk all Crusades, but I faced Crusaders in the first round, Crusaders in the second round, and Crusaders in the third round. And each one of those Crusader lists were built and played very differently from each other in that case. And that was cool enough too. And I felt like the successors were even more varied in that feeling of going up against them.
Yeah.
Because I certainly wasn't staring at Legatum on any of these other guys' boards. I know it's a reroll, and rerolls are still awesome, but rerolls are all over the place in Saga. I wasn't too worried about it without Legatum. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was good run for you. Definitely up against some stiff competition. So Britt, he ended up coming in second. So he won his 2 other games. He was third in battle score. I was third. I got best general for the highest battle score after you. And then Jim Randall is a great player. It looks like he didn't have a good day
Later on.
for this event, but we know he is a skilled opponent. So he had
Definitely.
three tough matches and pulled it out. So yeah, got to feel proud about that, my man.
Well, I really felt like I slipped on a banana peel last year in Antiquity, so it was good to come back and win on Antiquity the next time. So
yeah. So we shall see once the Caesars land how this shakes things up even more. It's going to be really interesting.
I really got my eyes still on Chivalry right now, though. I gotta say,
yep, that'll be first.
The old carts are all full of Osprey books and every other painting, heraldry thing in there too. So I'm excited for both of the AOC books to land, hopefully within the next year.
So that should definitely be landing before Adepticon. I do not foresee Caesars landing before
eventually.
then. But yeah, probably sometime next year. I would say it's probably going to be the one after Chivalry. So yeah, well done. If people want to get in touch with you, I believe you are on Discord.
I'm on Discord on there too. I think for the Saga stuff, it's just my initials, SHHIII. So
okay, so take a look.
And you'll hear me on our own KC stuff going on too.
Yeah, looking forward.
Remiss to not mention the Iron Man we have coming next month. I don't know when this will air, so that might be like days before Iron Man again. But we've kind of shifted our tournament schedule around so that we can have a big 2-day event in November. So that's the one we really want to bang the war drums for.
Right.
Again, Kansas City is a great distance for a lot of people to draw a lot of competitive players together. And so we want to really start rolling on this each year a little bit and see if we can't get, like I said, if there's any Texans, any Houston club guys listening, I'd love to get you guys to Kansas City up here and play. I know we got some other Texas clubs, Lone Star Saga guys. I got Oklahoma there too. A lot of Southerners I'd love to see brought into conflict with some of the Northerners from Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois and stuff like that. I think it'd be great to see you guys square off. So
yeah, I agree. It'd be a good central location. I know Stephen Hollowell, I think he's taking the lead on that. So when he gets the firm details and stuff, I'll make sure to do a big announcement on the Saga Thursday episode. But keep that, I think, second weekend of November clear is when it's going to be throwing down. So yeah, that should be a good time. Well, Stephen, thanks again for coming on, sharing your knowledge. Always great to listen to you, and great
thanks for the good game. Thanks for having me
with you. Yeah, it was good hanging out, and gotta do it more often. It's always a blast. So all right, well, that's it, folks. If you have any questions about anything, definitely comment below or search Stephen out on the Discord, and we'll get back to you. But that's going to be it for this one. All right. Later, folks.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Saga! If you'd like to see more Saga content, consider joining the Heathen Army over on Patreon or popping on down to the Saga Thursday Discord server. Links below. Thanks, guys.